Rolin Jones, you're the showrunner for Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, which aired its second season this past year. The book is, or the two seasons are based on the first book, Interview with the Vampire. What did you most want to capture from the novel over the course of these two seasons?
Uh, yeah, a very particular romance. Um, the I don't know the strange war that happens between a 78-year-old man and a 148-year-old man who still have some stuff to figure out. I wanted Anne's language to make an aggressive appearance. The prose that's so lovely in there, which is sometimes the thing that falls first when you're adapting. And then yeah, I wanted a almost operatic um, experience for an audience who's willing to go with it. Emotions are really heightened, and uh, yeah, I don't know. Just general, I wanted it to be a nervy, um, vibrating, weird ass show. God bless AMC for letting us make it.
And how do you decide where to deviate from the source material? What to expand on, what to leave out? I imagine those are difficult decisions in any adaptation.
Well, there's a lot of wonderful stuff in our book, a really beautiful book to work off of. I think that the challenges were a little bigger in season two, mostly because there was a lot less plot in that book. The book is it's almost like five meditative conversations between vampires, and then some crazy events, and then you're out. And we had to kind of create a lot of plot out of that. But for the most part, yeah, we tried to jam as much Anne as we could in there. And the basic changes you make for anything that was beautifully written as a novel, and the choices that you'd have to make to turn it into something that is, for actors to speak from their, and for it to, cut over 15 episodes. I don't know. I think we cannibalized that book. There's not a lot left. There's a couple of characters that fell off for this reason or that reason. We made some decisions about the timeline. But I think it was done with a lot of love and a lot of collaboration with Anne, who is no longer with us.
And season two, you introduced the vampire troupe led by Armand. What most excited you about bringing those characters and storylines from the book to the screen and folding that in?
Oh, well, anytime you can shove theater into the face of TV viewers, always a good thing. I hire a lot of playwrights and a lot of actors from the theater. So I think if there's anything, we were just trying to restrain ourselves from making a lot of insider dumb theater jokes that nobody could care about. I think, it was, we always kind of had the specter of the movie behind us, and they did that part really well in the movie. So a lot started out just as like, oh, well, how are we going to do it? How are we going to justify doing this again? We don't want. There was also, I think, a caveat from AMC to don't repeat the movie. We've seen it. It's beautiful. It's out there. Our timeline really opened up a lot of opportunities to make it a grittier, dirtier, slightly more dangerous theater of the vampires than the movie or even in the book. Um, and the joy of actually setting something in post-war Paris. You see Paris going into the war, you see a lot of Paris during the war, and then you don't see a lot of stuff done in those first 4 or 5 years afterwards, which was, I think, for all of us, a nice way to feel like you were, coming into Paris in some kind of a side door. And also just numbers. Season one was like a chamber drama between three characters. And we got to expand it not only with just the bodies, but in space and time too, with what was going on with Dubai and what Louis was coming to realize was his truth along the way. So I don't know. Yeah. Also, I got to cast Ben Daniels again. Oh, best.
And what was it like writing for him, Ben Daniels, in the role of Santiago? That character being such a highlight of the season.
Well, we knew that was our guy from the day one. Even if he was already scheduled to go be on Lord of the Rings and our dates weren't working out to begin with, he is somebody we had up on the wall. I worked with him on a TV show previously about like 7 or 8 years ago, seen his theater work, and know what he can do. He's just one of those really wonderful actors that can sort of turn on a dime and take something that is very, very funny and then make it very sinister, just like that. The instrument is really huge, and we had a really hammy role for him, which was, and he's one of the really delicate butchers, just the right slice of ham. On top of given circumstances and stuff. What a joy. And he also acts like a naughty 14-year-old boy when the camera's off too. So it's a nice energy on Sam. And he gets it like sort of like the grand dam of our theater troupe, because they were all a bunch of theater actors who had known him growing up in the theater too. So that was a treat. You'd see it on stage. I mean, you see it in the camera. There's a lot of joy. It feels like a theater company there. He had a lot to do with it.
Now there were more than a dozen books in the Vampire Chronicles. You're going into season 3. And you'll be covering the Vampire Lestat. Would you cover them all if you could, or is there like a specific endpoint that you have in mind?
I mean, like anything else, you're supposed to take a really good hard look at yourself and go, do you have anything left to say about vampires? And they pay you to do this, so that's hard. And I have a 3-year-old child and all that stuff, and who doesn't want a swimming pool? But I think if you're really honest with yourself, you got to say, can you still bring it with the same energy that you brought it the first time? And for season 3, I believe I can, and I believe our staff can. For 12 books, man, I think somewhere along the way you got to hand that thing off, because when you're up to writing the 540th scene of Louis, you really need some new blood in there. I think that's a while off. If I had my druthers, we'd do this, figure out Queen of the Dam, Tale of the Body Thief, maybe Mennock, somewhere there. And at some point, there will be somebody who already says, oh, it's clearly should be this person. And also, vampires I mean, by that time, who knows how old Sam Reed and Jacob Anderson are going to look. They might not even look the immortals anymore. So we're just going to try, as long as AFC gives us the dough, we're going to try to make aggressive things with it. Feel very privileged to do it. But yeah, look, I'm in the heat. It's hard for me to talk about season 2. I'm in the heat of season 3 right now. I got season 3 head in here right now. So I think hopefully none of this all sounds really canned. It's just that I'm already in the next season. Yeah.
Now the show is getting a spinoff about the Talamasca who tied into season 2. Does it complicate the storytelling process to factor in storylines that are happening in the same universe but on another show?
It's fun. We're communicating with each other. You don't want to you don't want to be the person that says you can't do that, you can't do this. You want like John and Mark, who are working on the Talamasca show, to have as much freedom as I had. That being said, we have a couple characters that are crossing over, so there's some communications between the two about like what those characters need to do in the next season of Vampire, and make sure that those things don't conflict. And if anything, make sure that they can help build a better story. Like I'm reading the scripts and grafting on the given circumstances of their show into ours. And that's cool. That's fun. And they're lovely guys too, so that makes it easy. Yeah.
Well, I want to congratulate you on your work on seasons 1 and 2, going into season 3 of Interview with the Vampire, and thank you so much for talking with me about it.
Oh, a pleasure. Yeah. And what? Gold Derby.
Blake Crouch, you created Dark Matter, which is based on your own novel about a physics professor who ends up transported to an alternate reality. Well, first off, how are the experiences similar and different writing prose fiction versus writing for TV?
Wow, in a lot of ways they couldn't be more different, but in a lot of ways it's just storytelling in a different medium. One of the things that was so interesting to me about the idea of getting to adapt dark matter is felt a little bit like a do-over. It had a few years since the book was published, and with a little bit of time behind me, I could look back and say, oh, what if I had done this a little bit differently, and actually got a chance to do it.
Is it challenging to translate your own writing into like such a different medium, or actually does having that experience with the story kind of, give you a head start?
And I've never done this, what I think would be incredibly challenging would be to create a work in screenplay form out of nothing. Uh, for Dark Matter, I had the source material of my book, which I had spent years working on. And although a lot of things changed, there were a lot of big milestones and goalposts that I knew would not change. So it kind of gave a nice guardrails to the process. But yeah, of course, the challenges were huge. The book is this very tight single player POV of Jason Dessen trying to get home. And I knew that I wanted to really incorporate Daniela Dessen's POV as she's living with this imposter who looks exactly like her husband, but is behaving weirdly, to say the least. And figuring out what those moments were was challenging, but also, frankly, some of the most fun aspects of the show.
And what kind of research goes into like a heady project like this with science concepts at its core, driving the narrative?
For me, for my books, it's always important to me that the science is based in some level of reality. Maybe not something that is achievable now, but maybe 10 minutes into the future, or if we'd had a breakthrough in one area of technology, maybe this would be possible. I had no science training in university. I was a straight up English major who didn't want to go anywhere near a math or a science class, and only fell in love with it after I had graduated. So I enlisted this amazing scientific consultant named Clifford Johnson, who ran the astrophysics department at USC. And he read my manuscript when it was in galleys and gave me notes. And then when we got into the business of making the show, I brought him on as a consultant, read every script and met with our production designer just to make sure we were in the realm of what is possible, because people love to tell you after the fact that you have no idea what you're talking about.
Is it challenging to keep the alternate reality straight? Like, do you need like flow charts or diagrams in the writer's room just, to make sure all your continuity is what it needs to be?
And our script coordinator is kept very, very busy. The sheer number of documents it takes to track not just the worlds, but the clothing across characters, because one of the challenges you have when you're creating a thing where there's 30 versions of Joel Edgerton is how do you tell the story of each one? And it can't just be through the words on the page. It has to be through wardrobe. It has to be through hair and makeup, and the tracking of all of that stuff just gets really, really complicated. But we got most of our crew back for season 2, and everyone has a good shorthand with it now. So hopefully it's going to be a little more seamless this time out.
And how was it working with Joel Edgerton, trying to create these different versions of his character throughout the series?
It's a real amazing experience, because with Joel, he's just a great human being. He's also a fantastic director and a writer. Aside from being an actor, he's a real triple threat, and you get access to those parts of his brain as well. You get access to the writer part of Joel, to the director part of Joel. So he was involved very early on as we were crafting season 1, and was just integral to the process of building out this character much more from what was on the page in the book.
And Jakob Verbruggen directed the first 3 episodes of the show. What was the collaboration like to establish kind of the look and style of the series from those first episodes?
We had a lot of prep to kick the show off, which was desperately needed. It was intense, because we weren't just building the look of one world. We were creating the look of multiple worlds. we were, obviously when you make a pilot, it's so much different. You are setting the visual, the tonal language of everything that's to come. And Jakob was a really good partner. He's a beautiful shooter. Loved working with him.
And how do you balance the science and lore of the series, and with the kind of story and characters that are at the heart of it and really driving it?
For us, it's always more of a question of the characters. I don't think anyone really ultimately cares what the mechanics are at the core of a show. All we ultimately care about is the characters, and if we get on the characters side, and if we put the audience inside their head and make the audience really care what happens to them, make them afraid of the bad things that are coming, then I find the rest of it sort of sorts itself out. So we spend most of our time talking about how to really build the most compelling characters we possibly can.
And as you mentioned, the book is in the first person, from your protagonist's point of view, and the series, it gets to expand on that to view other characters. Was there a character in particular that you wanted to really explore, who you didn't get as much of a chance to in the novel?
Two, really. Wanted to give Daniela Dessen's character proper due, because she's really only comes in at the end and at the beginning. It's really Jason's story. But after the book was published, I got more reader questions about what happened to Amanda than any other email I'd ever gotten. Like literally like 100 a month, people asking what happened to Amanda, what happened to Amanda, because the book sort of she just goes away. By design, but still people were upset. And I knew that we had to do right by the character of Amanda when it came to the show. So her journey really changed from the book. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of.
And the show has been renewed for a second season. Do you know in what ways you're planning to continue to open up the story and expand the story going forward?
We're just going to follow the characters where they take us. And I think we left all of our main cast in really interesting moments. We're excited to follow them along, and there's some big surprises to come.
I want to congratulate you on your work on the show this season, and thank you so much for talking with me about it.
No problem. Thank you.
Ryan Condal, you're the showrunner for House of the Dragon, which is set hundreds of years before the events of Game of Thrones. Well, first off, was it daunting to enter this world that already has so much established lore attached to it between the books and the series?
It was very daunting, but I mean, I don't think the established lore is really the reason. I think that's actually a gift, is coming into this incredibly well realized world. I think the daunting part is trying to follow the most successful television series of all time and daring to think you have something to say in that universe, and finding the right path to it, and not just continuing the story because everybody wants to revisit Westeros and see more people in blonde wigs and their dragons. You're trying to find the core elements that made the show different, if familiar to the original, but different thematically, different from a character, from a storytelling perspective. The things that are in play in terms of how this world holds up a mirror to our world in reality, and again, there is always going to be similarities, I think, between the show and the original show. It's a struggle for power over a throne and a crown, but finding those things that made this different, I think, and coming in and trying to follow the original were probably the things that kept me awake at night, and still do the most.
Now, one thing I imagine is, might be daunting about the show is, like Game of Thrones, you're dealing with a large cast of characters and interweaving storylines. How is it, how do you go about managing all of those details?
I mean, that's all it is all very challenging. Believe it or not, we have fewer point of views, I think, than the original series did. I mean, I know it can feel like you're getting tossed around a lot. I think that was one of the things that we we really locked into early with how we broke House of the Dragon, which was that it's essentially it was going to be about this one family. It's a Greek tragedy about this one family, this Targaryen family, an extended family, because they're multiple different wings and branches of it. But essentially all of the storytelling kind of centers around those characters, their parents, their offspring. And I think that made it more manageable. But look, it's very difficult. It's a multi POV story. It's based on a history book, so you have a lot of sketches of things, of characters, of ideas, of events, of history, but you don't really have all the details that were present in the original books that the original series was based on. So there is a ton of invention required, and it just it's the writing process tends to take 6 months to a year, and there's just lots of iterations and lots of Google documents and tracking documents and lots of index cards up on the board. And I think we just try to break the individual character stories against the plot points that we know we need to hit, and then figure out how to interweave them. And that's in many ways the most fun and the most challenging part, is finding ways to have all of the different stories touch each other, even when the characters aren't present necessarily in the same zip code. Is figuring out how one person's action over here causes an effect that affects King's Landing, and so on. But that's the trick with, I think, any of these multi POV shows. It was definitely the challenge with the original, for sure.
We meet some new dragon riders in season 2. What is your process for introducing new characters into this already expansive canvas? Like, how do you know when the time is right and how to interweave?
Well, I mean, we do follow the book. I mean, the book is our first kind of guidepost, and that in itself is a really nice outline and timeline for the big events that were chronicled in history. And we kind of base that's sort of the first pass. It was like, what are the next big events that nobody argues that they all happened. And then we try to figure out who our POVs are into those events, which characters we're going to be following, and who's the eyewitness that's going to take us through this event. And sometimes it's one of our main characters, and sometimes it requires a new POV from the book. And oftentimes it's needing that new point of view, which dictates how a new character is going to get introduced, whether they're a point of view character, meaning whether we're going to take time and story time and spend it with them. But I think it happens pretty organically. I mean, the Dragon Riders were a great challenge and great fun in season 2, because we introduced them sort of long before they even sniffed their first dragon. And what it was great to be able to do is to introduce these characters that were not from the upper crust, not from the nobility, but were often from the most common folk in this world, who don't often get a voice and a say in anything that happens, particularly in the storytelling in the show, just because of the nature. The show is typically about the upper crust of the upper 1%. So it was really fun getting to introduce those characters organically and tell their stories in a way so that we knew who they were and what they were worried about and what they wanted and what they were thinking about, and their hopes and desires and dreams, and whether they had any relationships, people they cared about in the city where they were living before they went off and tried to claim a dragon. So hopefully by the time you get to that big climactic episode where everybody goes in and tries their luck with the giant fire-breathing nuclear weapons that could just as easily kill them as accept them as their rider, you really care about them, and you're invested in their story, and hopefully you want to see them succeed.
You do have a number of dragons on the series. Do you have a favorite one, like your favorite that's your favorite to write about and write for, and to see realized on the screen when once the visual effects artists have had their way with it?
They're all great fun to work with. It's actually, that still is the best moment, I think, for me, because it takes so long to make them, that really I'm only seeing the final iteration of the dragon a few weeks before everybody else does when it airs, because those are the things that you're working on until the very last minute, just because of the way the visual effects pipeline works. So when you see those final polished shots that have all the the smoke and the fire and all the little snarls and the drool and the flies around them, when they really come together and come to life as characters, that's really, it's super exciting. And this year it was great fun just working with the dragons that we hadn't seen before. Vermithor, the Bronze Fury. I mean, what a great name. And that's the second biggest dragon in the world, next to Vagar, who we got to know quite well in season 1 and season 2. So I think bringing Vermithor to life in Lonnie Peristeer's episode, in the 7th episode, was super exciting, just because we had designed him and worked on him for so long, and then we're literally seeing him come together weeks before we have to let go of the episode, because it has to make the air date.
Are there ever moments where you want to accomplish something in a story or in a scene, and for some reason the visual effects artist can't do a certain thing, or there are other like factors or limitations?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think everybody just assumes that we have unlimited resources on the show, and we do have an embarrassing number of resources, time, money, all sorts of the toys that you get to play with, the incredible crew and artisans that we get to work with that are all at the top of their game. These are all top level British film industry artists. But there are things that are just not practically possible, often, as there are with any television show. And I wouldn't say it's visual effects limitations. I would just say it's more, sort of things that you can ask an actor to do, things that you can ask a young actor to do, versus things you would expect of an adult actor. And there are limitations that come to that, and things that we haven't been able to do exactly as done in the book. That's the nature of taking something that's in a written medium, that's a prose medium, and moving it over to a film medium, where you have to work with directors and actors and production designers and visual effects artists to bring the thing to life. And that's just part of the adaptation process. And I think the fun of that is just taking the limitations and trying to spin them into new things that are that you maybe wouldn't have thought of if you didn't run into that particular roadblock, and trying to make it something new and exciting.
Congratulations on the show. Looking forward to more of it to come. And thank you so much for talking with me about it.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Mike Schur, you created the comedy series A Man on the Inside, based on the documentary The Mole Agent, about a man who goes undercover at a retirement community. What was your relationship with the documentary before you decided to adapt it into a scripted series?
I was alerted to it by my producing partner, Morgan Sackett, who sent me a text and said, have you seen that documentary? And I said, no. And he said, we should watch it, and we should turn it into a series starring Ted Danson as the main character. And so then I watched it, and I wrote him back, and I was like, that is correct. That is what we should do. It was this little behind the scenes of how Hollywood works. So the reason it was such an immediate, obvious no-brainer to me was the documentary, I think, is very beautiful. I think it's very sweet, but more importantly, I think it gives everyone who sees it the same general feeling. And that feeling is, I should call my dad more, or I need to call my grandma, or I want to hang out with my kids. It has this way of making everyone want to reach out to loved ones. And that's just like it's a universal feeling, as far as the folks who have watched it that I know have told me. And it's also a rare feeling. And I just thought, man, if I could somehow make a show that gave people that same feeling, what a nice thing that would be. So I love the documentary, and we used it as our North Star for the making of the season, as like, we knew we were going to have to add some characters and change some stuff and whatever, but I always wanted the show to feel the way the documentary felt. So that was our guiding principle for the duration.
And of course, a documentary and a scripted comedy are quite different forms of storytelling.
How so?
Do you choose? So how do you choose where to draw from the original, and where you need to expand, and why you would expand there?
Well, I mean, the actual story in the documentary is pretty much the story of the season, but you know, you're going from something that's 90 minutes to something that's 8 episodes that are half an hour each. So we just needed more characters. We needed more, the everything needed to be beefed up a little bit. And the biggest thing I think was there's a moment in the documentary early on where Sergio, who's the man who takes the job, is sitting with his daughter, and she's expressing a little concern about her fairly elderly father taking on this kind of insane job. And he says, you know, since your mom died, I just haven't known what to do with myself. You know, like I wander around my house and I just kind of stare at the wall, and I feel like this would be good for me. And that's what makes the daughter sort of say, okay, give it a shot. And then that's sort of all you see of her, because the story in the documentary isn't really about her. But I felt like, oh, well, that's a glimpse into something that matters in his life, is his relationship with his daughter. So Mary Elizabeth Ellis plays Ted's daughter in the show, and we made her into a character, and she has her own life. She's married, she has kids, and she has a job, and she gets involved in the proceedings. And so it's that kind of thing where, like, I think in an ideal world, you know, you have to make changes, you have to invent characters and stuff, but what it should always feel like to me is that it's like you're on a desktop and you're like clicking on something that's already there, and it's like that file opens up, and then you have a bunch more stuff in there that you can click on and open up and sort of broaden out. But the source material is always where you started. That was our theory.
The director of The Mole Agent, Maite Alberti, is an executive producer of the series. How involved, you know, was Maite in the making of the series, and did you like consult with her a lot?
She and her producing partners, Julie and Chris, were around a lot, and they read scripts and they gave us their thoughts, and they came to the set and watched us shoot. And they were it was sort of a perfect situation, because they would always give their opinions, but their attitude was like, we understand that this needs to be its own thing. So like, they were never like stomping their feet and saying like, how dare you, or it has to be this way or whatever. They were just sort of interested observers. And we used them as a resource when I sent them the pilot when we finished it, when I finished writing it, and we would send them cuts and they would send thoughts and notes, and they were always very positive and sort of, it was always in the vein of like, hey, here's one outsider's, you know, observation about that scene or whatever. So it was kind of a perfect scenario. They were not at all controlling, and they didn't want to be. They wanted it to be. I think I remember when I was on The Office, Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant were like this too, where they were like, look, we made our thing. It's on our shelf. We have DVDs of it. We can watch it anytime we want. Like, make your thing and see, and maybe it'll be great. And so I think that's sort of tacitly the attitude that Maite and Julie and Chris all took about our show.
Now the film is Chilean, and the series moves the story to San Francisco. What made you decide on that setting for the series?
The home that the Sergio checks into in the documentary is called the San Francisco Home for the Elderly or something. And so I was trying to figure out where to set it. And I watched the documentary again, and I noticed that detail and was like, well, it's kind of if there's such thing as a sign, that's a sign. And I love San Francisco. I love the city. I think it's a wonderful, scenic, beautiful place to be. I like Northern California in general. I think it's very pretty up there. And there was something about it that seemed right. And so I didn't think too much harder than that, of like, well, it's mentioned in the documentary, and it's a neat city, and it's got a lot of, you know, Charles, I knew by the time I made this decision, Charles's career as an academic was in like structural engineering. And so it was an easy move to say like, oh, he's obsessed with the Golden Gate Bridge, and we can just put that beautiful, iconic bridge in the back of a bunch of scenes, and it'll look really pretty. So yeah, it was a pretty simple choice.
Now, telling a story set in a retirement community gives you an opportunity to work with some really great older actors. Like, what was the casting process and experience like?
It was so fun. You know, we made a pretty big bet, I would say, on the idea that we would be able to fill out this ensemble cast with great actors who were north of 70. And Allison Jones, who's I think is the greatest living casting director, cast the show. And I was sort of talking it through with her, and she was like, oh yeah, this will be easy. This will be easy. You'll have a bunch of choices for all these parts. And we did. We saw tons of great actors, tons of really funny people. Sally Struthers came in and read, which is like, it's ridiculous. Like Sally Struthers has been on some of the most famous TV shows of all time since, you know, the early 70s. And then here she is like coming in going, Sally Struthers, I'm based in LA. And it's like, no, we know who you are. And John Getz and Margaret Avery and Stephen McKinley Henderson. Some of those were folks like Stephen was a guy that we just wanted to be in the show, and we called him and we Zoomed with him and said like, please do this. And he thankfully agreed. But Margaret Avery came in and read for her role. So did John Getz. All these people who were so funny and so good. And I don't know, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful process. And like I said, we saw multiple people who would have been great in those roles for each part. And it really it made me feel like we were onto something. It felt like we had an entire sort of zone of casting all to ourselves, because all these folks are so good and funny and talented, and they were just waiting for parts to come along, you know?
And of course, at the heart of the show is Ted Danson, who you've worked with before. What is that creative partnership collaboration like with him?
That's awful. He's a monster, very bad guy, very mean, thoughtless, cruel. Ted is I don't know. I bore myself when I talk about him, because I feel like he's the greatest to ever do it on TV. I think I would stack his performances and his resume on TV up against anyone in the history of the medium, and I think I'd win. I think I'd have the nuts in that poker hand. And he it's not only that he's great. It's not only that he's funny, and then he can be like silly and goofy when he needs to be, and very dramatic when he needs to be. It's that he loves the work. He loves acting. He loves acting more than anything. He got bitten by the acting bug when he was in college, and it's just the thing that he loves the most to do. And so he just wants to be on the set all the time. He wants to be with other actors. He loves nothing more than like just doing scenes. He just wants to act. And I remember asking him when we were making The Good Place, I was like, do you want to direct an episode? He was like, oh God, no. And I was like, really? You have no interest? Do you want to write one? And he was like, no. He has no interest in any other discipline. He does not want to write. He doesn't want to direct. He doesn't want to design sets. He just wants to act. It's just the thing he loves the most. And you see it in every moment he's performing. You're just like, man, that dude loves acting. And I guess if I were as good at anything as he is at acting, I would love doing that thing too. So it makes sense. But I mean, it's a dream. The answer, the short-winded version of an answer to your question is working with him is a dream, and I hope I do it for the rest of my life.
Well, congratulations on the new show. And thank you so much for talking to me about it. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. And can I just say, it's so nice on a panel like this. It's just so great that you guys did not have Bill Lawrence on. It's just such a relief, because he's just too successful, and he's too handsome, and I just don't trust him. And I was worried when I got this invitation that you guys were going to have Bill Lawrence on, and I'm just very grateful you decided not to have Bill Lawrence on. So thank you for that.
Bill Lawrence, you're the showrunner for Shrinking, about a therapist experiencing grief over his wife's death, and also, treating his patients in new ways. The show is, currently in its second season as we're recording this. What inspired you to explore the world of therapy and therapists?
I'm shrinked up myself. It's not a surprise. I didn't think I needed that for a good chunk of my life, and my wife disagreed. But the truth is, I've always liked kind of demystifying professions is part of kind of creating shows. And it started even back in Scrubs, when we did that as a comedy. It used to be that American TV audiences like their doctors to kick open doors and be very serious and say words like stat and stuff, and I need oxygen over here. And my experience was most of my buddies and people I knew that had become doctors were just as messed up as any of the rest of us. And Brett Goldstein and I were both kind of working on pilots around messed up therapists, because so often in television, they're usually mainly there to be expository, for the main characters. And we thought the world of people that were trying to help other people through kind of their mental ups and downs, but being screwed up themselves was kind of a fun world for a comedy.
Is it therapeutic at all to write the show? Like, is the writer's room, kind of group therapy?
Look, man, writers' rooms are all therapeutic because, especially in comedy, um, I'm speaking for myself, but our rooms always kind of revolve around people being comfortable enough to make very, very painful admissions about who they are and what they say and what's happened to them. This show is super weird and specific for me because my wife plays a character named Liz on it. And the writer's room, Jason and Brett and I jokingly say Ted McGinley is playing me. And it gets a little too meta for me some point when especially if it's a script that I didn't write, when he says things that I know I've said in the writer's room out loud to people. So it's very confusing.
Now, as you mentioned, Brett Goldstein co-created the show, and in season 2, you introduced him to the cast as the drunk driver who was responsible for the death of Jimmy's wife. Did you always plan on bringing him on board in this role? How did that decision take place?
No, man, I almost screwed it up. It's really funny because it's kudos to Jason Segel because he's our other kind of co-creator, and we always knew we were doing that character on the show. And I did the very same thing that I think audience members do sometimes, which is so I did it with my wife. When I met my wife, she was on the Drew Carey show. And I remember going, oh, it's gonna be cool going on a date with this woman. She's one of the guys and kind of a beer drinking, sports loving, and she was not that at all. And I made the same mistake with Brett, is when we came up with this character that we said in the writer's room, the second year of the show would only work if people felt tremendous empathy for this actor, even in light of what he had done. And in my head, Brett was still this bearded, gruff Roy Kent guy, and I didn't see it. And Jason Segel's like, dude, you're crazy. This is more like, this kind of sweet, sensitive soul is more like who Brett is in real life. And and Brett, to his credit, was not lobbying for it, but Jason really lobbied hard, and it was an awesome decision. I think it made the year.
And of course, Jason Segel, he has, the ability to handle both the humor and, the pathos of the show really well. Does that free you up in the writer's room to, knowing that, your actors, him and the rest of the cast have that necessary range that they can really tackle that well-rounded tone that you have?
Yeah, look, without trying to sound pretentious, we talk about in the writer's room a lot, this kind of tonal tightrope, because a lot of my shows, they only work if you can veer from very big and comedy forward stuff, sometimes silly, sometimes banter driven comedy, and do kind of hairpin curves into pathos and drama and show, stories that have some emotional content. And it would be disingenuous to pat ourselves on the back as writers and say, and that's what we do. We can only do that because of the actors and actresses that play the comedy is real and are so talented that they can switch on a dime and kind of tug at your emotional heartstrings, even after they've just been doing something ridiculous the scene before. And Jason would be the first person to tell you it's not just him. It's Harrison Ford, it's Jessica Williams. Ted McGinley gets a lot more to do this year. Luke Tenney, Lukita, Maxwell, Michael Urie, they're all so skilled at it, and that's why the show works.
Are there any actors or characters who grew in your mind as from the start of the series that became a larger kind of aspect than originally planned, just because of how the character was turning out and how the performance was?
Yeah, look, it's a fun question because I'm a dinosaur, man. I started out in network television in multi-camera sitcoms where if a certain dynamic was working and you would lean into it and then do more and more scenes of those people because it's a great gift to get big giant character laughs of recognition from a studio audience. On this show, Ted McGinley's character Derek was not a regular the first year, and he was supposed to be just a good-natured husband, you know, who was peripheral, and he so crushed comedically that not only is he a regular this year, but you know, we've given him storylines of his own, and he's so skilled and beloved. It was really cool to see. Also, we knew going in that we had two very kind of not neophytes, but certainly young to the business actors in Lukita Maxwell, who plays Alice, and Luke Tenney, who plays Sean, that were just kind of dropped into a TV show with not only major veterans like my wife, like Krista Miller and Jason, but also icons, you know, I mean, doing scenes with Harrison Ford. And you just got to be honest about the business aspect of it. If they hadn't been able to hang comedically and dramatically, they'd still be in the show, just not as front and center. You know, I listened to Mike a little bit. I'm going to echo the same things. As you know, it's an embarrassment of riches here, because top to bottom, the cast is so talented. We find ourselves, you know, trying to make sure that there's airspace for everybody.
And the show is coming back for a third season. And you know, you had an original 3-season plan for the show. Are you still on track to end this particular story the way you had originally envisioned, or is there room for more? Like, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. I really kind of enjoy. Look, I've had such a fun. I didn't expect to have a career renaissance in my mid-50s. I'm super grateful for it. The most interesting thing has been when I've been pitching these streaming shows, I generally pitch a beginning, middle, and end. You know, here's how it starts, here's the middle season, and here's where we want to finish this story. But there is no greater gift than enjoying what you do and enjoying the people you're doing it with. The way the landscape's changed now, at least for me anyways, is we're definitely going to stick to our guns and tell the beginning, middle, and end of this story. And if we're lucky enough to keep making it and everybody's into it and wants to keep working, I can come up, you know, with this super talented writing staff, we'll come up with another 3-episode story for this gang. I just think by its nature of what we pitched, were we still telling the 3-episode story of how a man and his kind of found family deals with the super traumatic, catastrophic event of a spouse dying. If in year 5 or 6 they were still talking about that and being sad about it, it would feel a little redundant. But I fully expect to keep this show going if we're all having as much fun as we currently are. Just a different story.
Well, congratulations on the show, and looking forward to the rest of season 2 and season 3 coming up. So thank you so much for talking to me about it.
Hey, thank you. And also congrats on being the first interviewer that didn't ask me to tell funny Harrison Ford stories. I appreciate it.
I'm Daniel Montgomery here for our Meet the Experts panel of TV showrunners. I'm joined by Rolin Jones from Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, Blake Crouch from Dark Matter, Ryan Condal from House of the Dragon, Mike Schur from A Man on the Inside, and Bill Lawrence from Shrinking. Now, one of the major duties for most showrunners is putting together a writer's room. So what are some of the most important factors to consider when selecting writers for a writer's room and putting together those creative personalities? Let's start with Bill.
I didn't want to go first. Look, for me, the bummer and then also high class problem right now is there's not a ton of production right now. And so when you're putting together a room, there's so many talented people out there that, you know, aren't working, that I've never been in this situation, you know, that you know, you're kind of looking at just this huge swath of writers. I think to say the thing that we focus on the most here is a healthy combination of really high level people, so that you can keep kind of the machine running. Shrinking is a good example. There's 4 other people on staff that have created and run their own shows. That kind of mix with, you know, younger voices, some that have come up through our system and some that we've hired. It's not only kind of a good kind of a dynamic in the room for me not ever feeling too old because there's young people that can explain things to me, but also still kind of a healthy mentorship on the staff, that there's people that can pick up the slack, because it's a big job, and I'd be an idiot if I said I was doing it all myself. And still a lot of people around, and I think this everybody will say that this matters. It matters to me that there's somebody that comes to work and is like, wow, a TV show. It keeps me from being too jaded and cynical, you know?
Ryan?
That was a great answer. I mean, I think for me, it's the voice on the page, just trying to find people with a unique and specific voice that somehow feels like it fits into the DNA of this pseudo Shakespearean fantasy show that we're doing. It's hard to find samples that fit exactly into the rubric because you're sort of writing again in this kind of pseudo period dialect, but there is an embarrassment of riches because it's an HBO show, because there are a lot of fans out there of the original that were excited at the opportunity to work on this. So I end up reading quite a bit to get there. But yeah, I think it's as Bill said, I think it's a combination of finding the right levels of experience and then trying to break in new voices that are coming at it from a different angle. Finding people that are fans of the original, that have read the books, and then people who specifically haven't, to just bring people in with a new perspective that are willing to sit there and say, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. What if we did it this way instead? And just trying to hit that, that magical alchemy of a high functioning writer's room.
Rolin?
Well, don't hire any crazy people. You got to spend time with these people for a little bit. So, good hair. Can they dance?
Any crazy sneak in, man?
This year was a little weird because we're one of our vampires has decided to become a rock star. Don't ask me. Anne Rice wrote it. So I had to hire 2 singer-songwriters onto our staff this year, which is amazing. It's a lovely perspective and super cool. A little bit of a drag too is that I had to some people who wrote quite well for my first 2 seasons that didn't have a room for them this year, which sucked ass. But on our show, facility for language is helpful, yeah, people are not afraid to find some humor in a very, very dark place, in the same scene, in the same line, that kind of thing. But just no crazies, no assholes, no divas, no crazy people, because they're your family for 6 months.
Blake?
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like I really come much more from the books and the prose side of things. So I have a lot of weird opinions about the words that actually go on the page. So I look a lot more for the energy of ideas. I like idea fountains, the good, the bad, the crazy. People like that really enriched our room on Dark Matter. And I'm still looking for the beautiful souls that can help write the show. Always looking for that.
And Mike?
I think it's really about their singular allegiance to me.
Yeah, no, I like
above
that.
all else. Like I wrote up my own sort of Project 2025 manifesto and handed it out, and it made it very clear that I am what is important in the room, and that all other aspects of their lives should be sublimated to their serving me and what I need. And it's gone very well. It's been a very fun room. I think they're really stepping up in a big way. I have nothing to add. I went 5th in this row, and there's no way that I can
You make
possibly...
everybody answer to the name Mike, or are they allowed to use their own names, man? How do you do
I
it?
give each of them a different name to call me.
Sure.
And then I get the sense that they're actually calling me something very different behind closed doors.
We all had to sign it just to be in the same Zoom room with
That's
them.
right. You all signed the NDAs. You can't say anything.
Yeah.
And what are some of your formative influences when it comes to writing for television or just writing in general? Like, where did you really draw that inspiration coming up? Let's start with Mike this time.
Oh, thank you. Greg Daniels, who was running The Office when that was my first sitcom job out here, was essentially my mentor, I would say, in terms of learning how to do the job. And I worked with a lot of excellent writers over the years, and I feel like I've learned something from all of them, regardless of whether they were senior or junior to me at the time I was working with them. I will say, though, that I think besides Greg, I think my number one teacher of for writing has been TV. Like I loved comedy when I was a kid. I watched it voraciously. I continue to do that all my life, and I feel like if I have any real kind of advantage over anyone else in this business, it's that I have good recall for TV episodes. So when someone pitches something, I can be like, oh, there was an episode of MASH in like 1971 where they did this story and it was really cool. And here's how it played out. And I really think that just watching TV is what made me a good TV writer, because I have this I think we all do. We have like an encyclopedic knowledge of the things that we loved that meant something to us, and that matters. It's like you have the whatever the number of at bats you have as a writer, you also have the number of at bats that you had as a viewer and a person who observed episodes of TV of shows that you loved. And I mean, I've now worked with Ted Danson twice. I've seen every episode of Cheers 4 times, and that helps me when I write for him. You know, it can't help but help me.
That's a great answer, man.
Thank you.
You did. It stole my answer. It was really good.
That was great.
I love a Cheers trivia thing sometime.
We all signed
Yeah.
Yeah, my bad, my bad.
Blake?
Yeah, I mean, on the book side, a huge Michael Crichton fan. I loved how he brought really complex scientific theories and hypotheticals into the public awareness and made those fun. It kind of tricked you into learning things. On the, and I came into this business a very weird way. My first novel that was ever made was Wayward Pines trilogy. And I went to set as sort of just this starry-eyed novelist, had never been on a film or a TV set, and was immediately thrust into all sorts of nonsense. I had no idea what I was doing. I was at big things. It was clearly in some sort of turmoil. But it was a lot of fun, and I learned so much, and was fortunate enough to just be sort of on day one, here's how it is actually made, and this is how the sausage goes, and this is something that interests you. And I was so taken with it. And the showrunner on Wayward Pines was Chad Hodge, who I was like, I'll let you guys make this, but I want to write one episode. And I said, sure, you write an episode. I'm sure you'll buck it up and I'll just fix it. It's fine. It's no big deal. And I just fell in love with the screenplay format. It just really spoke to me. And in a lot of ways, I think a lot of times, you're that first mentor who really shows you behind the curtain, really sticks with you. And that's where I got my way in.
Rolin?
I was got in through theater. So there's a John Guare play that I really loved, House of Blue Leaves, and there was a David Henry Wong play on Butterfly that was cool. So I was writing some plays, and then I wrote some play about a robot that was actually set in the same place that Genji Cohen's show Weeds was. So I got lucky and got that gig, and Genji Cohen and Roberto Benabi taught me how to be a TV writer.
I was in a production of A House of Blue Leaves in high school.
I think I saw that with John Mahoney in that. Such a good play.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. Yeah, it's
I loved it.
Beautiful play.
I loved it more than Mike did, but he spoke first. It's not a big deal.
My production is really known as the definitive version, I think.
I did not see that. You were like 11, which was a bold play for a 6th grade class to do, man.
It was a ridiculous play for a high school to be doing. We had no idea what you were saying. I don't remember a single thing.
What I did in high school, my drama teacher went through that absolute mental breakdown during our the Vietnam Rock.
Sure.
Grand Tenement, November 22nd, which was done by the La Mama Theater, and then 28 years later, a second production at El Camino Real High School, and then End of the World with Symposium to follow. Smash hits, all of them.
What happened to Guys and Dolls or something, man?
Yeah, like this. Right. And then Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, just as kind of a mid-semester play for people to dig. Oh, sure.
God bless you, Deborah Grieve. Maybe the guy I am today. God bless.
How about you, Ryan?
I kind of grew up on not as a kid, but sort of as my writer brain was evolving. I think it was a combination of the X-Files, The Simpsons, and Deadwood that sort of gave me my foundation as a TV writer, some combination thereof. And then I was lucky enough to get sort of scooped up very early in my early in my TV career slash on the dying end of my first attempt to be a feature writer by the great Carlton Cuse, who taught me how to be a showrunner. And I was lucky enough to make two pilots with Carlton. And he's very much a believer in picking somebody that he believes in, and then if you've ever seen the way that some of those swimming instructors teach babies how to swim, like newborn babies, by literally just throwing them into the pool and then watching them float back up to the surface. That was my experience there. And, with his guiding hand, but sort of like, go figure out how to do it and come to me with any questions, including running the room for the first time. So I survived a busted pilot and then made one that went to series for 3 seasons, and was very eternally grateful for all of that. So I think, I don't know, somewhere in that alchemy, I guess you find the guy that sits before you here. Oh, and John Milius, the great features writer. I've read every script of his that I could get a hand on, and his crazy madcap poetry, and I think all of that together has led to somehow to House of the Dragon.
Deadwood's incredible. Deadwood's just the best.
Yeah, and I got lucky enough to work with my fantastic writing partner Sarah Hess. Is her first job was getting discovered by David Milch on Deadwood. So she thought that everybody who worked in TV just went into a trailer and watched the showrunner lie on the floor and then just dictate
Spout off
in
language.
perfectly,
Yeah.
yes, iambic pentameter. And she's like, didn't everybody start this way? Yeah, exactly. So now, and I have Deadwood DNA within the show, and I adore Sarah, and yeah, that's all full circle, sort of.
And Bill?
Whoever goes last should just sum up. It's easy. Look, I'll sum up. My mentor, Gary David Goldberg, he plucked me out. We created Spin Shitty. We call it Spin Shitty. It's love. When I was a kid. But I think the cool thing, I love hearing these stories, because look, there's a lot of Hollywood that deservedly gets a bad rap, and bigger than life people that behave poorly. But one of my favorite things, and that's why I write about it a lot, is there's no man or woman, that is successful that didn't at least get mentored or helped into the business by somebody. And it's not always selfless. Sometimes it's out of need, and they recognize talent and help. But I'm always amazed by how many stories people have of people benevolently taking an interest in you and your voice and stuff. And I know I certainly feel super lucky that I got fired off 3 jobs in a row. I got fired off Friends, Boy Meets World, and The Nanny in 14 months. And my next gig was creating Spin City with Gary Goldberg. And so, most of us have a story about someone that on some level changed our lives, so that's why I write about it a lot. Other than that, I want to back up. My TV nerd helped me a lot. I have a huge pet peeve, by the way, because there's still, this is just in case there's ever young people that watch this is actual true things. I'm interviewing so many writers lately, and there's still some young people that, because it's cool for school, they're from the comedy world or whatever, that'll say, well, to be honest, I'll say, what are your favorite shows? And be honest, I don't watch a lot of TV. And then I always say, well, then please go do anything else. And by the way, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's not a crack habit. It's just watching television. You're fine. Other than that, just wanted to say it was cool to hear everybody's stories.
And one more question before I let you guys go. I'm wondering, since you guys talked about being mentored and people who you looked up to coming up, what would you say to someone who is coming up if you were to mentor someone, or if you do mentor someone? Like what sort of key advice would you give them for this business? Rolin?
Oh, I'm gonna start off with me. Holy
I got a good one, dude. I'll go ahead.
I'm gonna colostomy. Having surgery tomorrow. That's not a. What do I say? I say, upon entering the room, I tell everybody, myself included, to have a separate project on the side that is theirs, that is untouchable, because it's such it's a weird thing to build a television show, right? all sorts of edits and all sorts of rewrites for a lot of times reasons that have nothing to do with the quality of the writing, you know, production things or like that. But if you're young and you are used to this precious relationship that you have with the words on the page, this you're going to have to toughen up on that. Which I always say, always just have something else on the side that nobody can touch. You're working on that, and that will actually give you the freedom to be, I think, a little looser with what we're doing in the room, and actually feel a little bit more collaborative and a little bit more like you got skin in everything. And that's just to get over that those first initial things when you're like, oh, why did that change, or all that. I say that almost every time I open a room, and really very diligent about making sure to check in on how that project's going on for everybody.
Bill?
You know what? I told a bunch of new staff writers on we're doing a new show with Steve Carell, who's just an all-time great dude. And we were talking about it in there about the job. And I think, you know, you hire so many young people now that have, it used to be, right, we'd all write specs of other shows that existed to show that we can write in the voice of another show. And now often you're hiring young people because they've written an amazing play or an amazing short story or created an amazing short or something that highlights their voice and how distinct and cool their voice is. And I think often right now I was running into people that have forgotten like the part of the core of the job, and it's so weird, is that you're not hired just to write what you think is funny or good. It's a very weird mindset to know you're hired to write what I think is funny or good, you know? And you know, that's not like something that you're going to close doors on their creativity or something. But I say that as somebody that took a while. You know, I said, I told before I got fired from a bunch of jobs, and it took a second for me to realize that, you know what I mean? That my job was to kind of learn and enhance and add to the voice of the showrunner and the creator and what they were trying to do, and not go like, hey, I know this is episode 4, but here's a script completely different tonally from everything that we're trying to do. But I think it'll be really interesting because this one character behaves in a way that they haven't behaved at all, even though this is only the 4th episode of a series. It's always disastrous, you know? I think it's a hard thing to teach people in this new world because nobody comes out here to write someone else's show. They come out to hopefully one day get to tell their own stories, you know? And it's just a good lesson to give them a heads up for at the start.
Mike?
I have a very specific origin story as a writer, which is that I started at SNL and I was so freaked out. I was not admitting to myself that I was freaked out, but I was really freaked out to have gotten hired, and I sucked. Not false modesty. I was quite bad at the job for like a full year, and I was walking to work one day, and as I like headed into 30 Rock, a thought came into my head fully formed, and the thought was, oh, I hate my job. Which is like, I couldn't have possibly ever admitted that because I was like 23 and I was working at Saturday Night Live, and the thought that I didn't love my job was too crazy to entertain. But I realized that I was not happy. And so out of that revelation came 2 things. One is I went to therapy for the first time. Shout out to Bill and therapy. And it really helped me. But also I decided that the only way I was going to write anything good is if I got past the sort of like fear and the anxiety of like, will someone like this? Will this be successful? Like all of the ancillary stuff that you can't control. And I was like, all I can control is just if I write something that I think is funny. And if I get fired, I get fired. But at least I'm not going to operate from fear anymore. And so this isn't like maybe the most practical advice, but I always try to tell people like, you're only going to write things that are good if you feel like safe and happy and comfortable. And so if something is happening in the room, or if something is happening at the show or in your life that is making you not feel safe and comfortable and happy, you need to work on that. And we need to figure out how to change that, because I really do feel like people are either in like, I saw the speaker once who was so smart, and he said that people are either in survival mode or creative mode. You can't be in both. And if you're in survival mode, whatever that means, you just can't be creative. You can't be in a creative place unless you feel like you're safe. So my advice would be A, go to therapy, because everybody should go to therapy. And B would be like, figure out how to get into creative mode, which means not worrying or not stressing about anything you don't have to stress about. And obviously it's easier said than done. Like, people are in circumstances that vary widely in their lives, and some people can't get out of survival mode for any number of reasons. But to the extent that you can, in order to be creative, you have to feel like internally comfortable. And if you don't, you just won't be your best self. So that's what I always try to tell writers, like, let's figure out how, to the best of our ability, we can put everybody into creative mode and not survival mode.
Ryan?
These are all such amazing answers. I mean, the advice that I try to give everybody, I think it's similar to sort of what Rolin was saying earlier, is like, this is such an entrepreneurial business. And this is more or less like for the writers working in my room, more for just like people who come to me and say, hey, how do you break into screenwriting, TV writing these days? And I think it's just such an entrepreneurial business, more than it ever has been. You really have to make your own luck in a way. And that doesn't just mean like writing specs. It means like kind of just figuring out, I don't know, go create a comic book, go write a novel, go write a play, and also do all of those things kind of all at once. You just have to, it's not just about sitting down and writing spec after spec. You have to actually kind of try to break through your own pathways and find interesting ways and into getting in that job meeting that you want, or just getting in front of somebody. And more so, I think, now than even when I broke in, 17 years ago, when it felt impossible. I think now, at least there, it felt like there were set pathways to being able to figure out a way to do this job in an entry level position. So now I just think that's the big thing, is just always be an entrepreneur, even when you're on staff in a room. Figure out how to be an entrepreneur in that room and provide the thing that the showrunner isn't expecting you to provide as a young staff writer or story editor or whatever. I think that's the best thing, is just entrepreneurship.
And Blake?
Yeah, I really loved what everyone has said, especially what Mike was saying. Really connected with me. The idea that creating really comes from joy. It comes, and it absolutely doesn't come from a place of fear. It doesn't come from like feeling like the train is at your back, but unfortunately the train is always at your back in this job. And you have to really find a way to to sort of capture that special place where the creativity happens, and separate it away from all of the bullshit. And it's really like two answers, as I feel like such a newbie in the TV writing business. And to come up in the TV writing business, it feels like, well, the way to do that is you figure out how to write like I write, or how Bill writes, or how do you make my job so much easier? There's nothing better than getting a script that comes in. You're like, oh my God, this is great. I don't have to spend the next week figuring.
It's like a fantasy. It's like a sex fantasy for me now.
Oh, it's the best thing. It's what's better? Literally, what is better than that?
Just look at something and go, we could table this in an hour and a half and be done with it, and not work for 2 days and pretend we're working. It's a gift, dude.
It's the greatest. It's actually almost better than finishing a novel. It's like the best creative experience I've ever had. But that's not the same answer I would give someone who wants to at heart be a storyteller, which is, if you want to be a storyteller, you have to find out what it is that you have to say to the world about it. It's just literally saying, this is how I see the world, to someone else. And that involves introspection, and it involves writing about the things that you're afraid of, being aware of the things that you're afraid of, and being okay being a little bit vulnerable on the page. And I wrote a handful of novels before I really found success. And I really believe that why I eventually found success is because I started writing about the things that were on my heart and that were scary to write about, but those connected to people in a way that my other stuff hadn't, because I was okay being vulnerable. But it's been such a pleasure to listen to all of you gentlemen talk about this stuff. It's just, wow. Thank you.
Especially you, Mike.
I'm
There you go.
annoyed because I don't even feel like I came in the top 5. I think Daniel did better than me. So upsetting.
Well, I want to thank all of you too. It's been a pleasure listening to all of you discuss the work you do and the craft of it. And you all make such different work, which is one of the most exciting things to hear about such a diverse array of shows. So thank you guys so much, and it's been a pleasure.
Watch these shows; they're all very good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.